Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Higher Vibration Podcast. In case you don't know me, my name is Sara Beer, and I am the host. This is something that was like a passion project for me that started in early 2020, and it had a little bit of a different vibe at that time. I was more interested in exploring how would you call that? It kind of exploring like the human psyche specifically. And I shared a lot of my own personal stories with that. And like we went off the deep end with some really weird concepts. And I had a lot of fun with that. And I did that on and off for like 2 years. But then life went on, as we know. 2020 onward was a weird time period. And I kind of took a step back from that for a while. And I actually revamped it. I revamped that podcast, I think, to, was it Resonance? It was Resonance. Anyways, the reason that I'm restarting this podcast now is because I've been feeling called to, for a long time, to create a platform to share stories. If you are new here and you don't know me, a lot of what I do is I'm a writer and I write a lot of poetry books and other things. But I'm also a sound healing practitioner, meditation teacher, and life coach. But I love storytelling and I love how we can learn through our lessons with other people and their experiences and what that really means, for us as we're going through and hearing somebody else tell that story. So what I really wanted for this new revamping of the podcast is to create a platform for everyday people and people may be famous, but mostly for everyday people who have been through some really significant, challenges in their life that came to them in a way that they had no choice but to overcome it. And because of that, it changed everything in their life. And to create a platform for people to share their stories and how they navigated it and how that changed everything for them and, how they came to terms with the fact that, maybe they're grateful for that in the future tense. So I think it's important to share that because as we hear our own stories and listen to other people's stories, we learn a lot about ourselves when we listen to other people's stories. And we don't always have to learn lessons the hard way. We can learn things by what other people share. And I really feel like that's so important and needed. And I wanted to create a platform, a place where you could tune in anytime you want and feel like you're like sitting with a bunch of cozy friends and hearing like some really like deep stories about life that makes you laugh and cry. And I think it's really the gold, like taking like life's coal and being able to alchemize that into something actually quite beautiful. And that's what I really wanted to create a space for, to share those stories. It's been a journey. It's been a journey. And the reason that I think for myself that I'm feeling so called to share this now and to create space for this is I've had my own fair share of difficulties in my life. If you're familiar with anything with astrology, I'm a Scorpio stellium. So my life is pretty much just a consistent death and rebirth cycle, whether I like it or not. But I've noticed for myself during these cycles how I can get so down, and you lose track of like the light for a little bit in a lot of instances. And there's ways to find your way back, but sometimes it's harder than others. And I feel like while we listen to other people's stories, it can help us start to connect the dots and help us move and transition through some of that better. Like for myself, since this is the first episode and I'm not interviewing anybody, I'm going to share a little bit about my own journey and a little bit about what I've been through just this past year. It's been crazy. So in the beginning of this year, I moved back in with my grandmother, and I began a new chapter of my life. And I then suffered from some kind of really bad virus. I don't know, could be the Rona, who knows what it was. But the point was that this virus attacked my nervous system in a way that made me feel like I just couldn't exist. Like my brain felt like it was going to explode out of my head. It was really scary. And I didn't know how I was going to make it through. And I was having constant panic attacks because it attacked my nervous system on such a deep level that I never felt safe. And I kept calling my friend who is an ER nurse, and I'm like, am I dying? What do I do? And she was just like, no, you're not dying. I don't feel like you're dying, because she's also intuitive. And she was like, you just got to breathe through it. You're having a panic attack. And it just kept causing these panic attacks, but they were bad. Like I would be shaking and I couldn't sleep at night. I feel like this buzzing sensation going through my whole body. And it was really scary. And it went on for months, like months. Like I couldn't sleep. Like sometimes I think I only got 3 or 4 hours of sleep for months. It was really bad. And I'm normally somebody who like loves to sleep. Like I in my past anyway, before this year, I would sleep for like 8 to 10 hours, no problem. Like I could just hit my head on the pillow and it'd be my happy, safe place, and then I go to sleep. Right? So that's what I came from. And then this event happened to me where I could no longer sleep. And I became a little traumatized going to sleep at night, because I was like, oh my God, am I gonna sleep? Am I gonna fall asleep tonight? I don't know. What's gonna happen? And I started feeling like fearful of even coming into my room at the end of the day and getting ready to go to sleep. I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna endure now? I kept having like nocturnal panic attacks, which is where you fall asleep, and 10 minutes into falling asleep, all of a sudden you wake up to a panic attack, and it is not fun. You kind of feel like, oh my God, I'm waking up to death. And you like run to the bathroom and like look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, am I okay? You know? And I had to just do a lot of coping mechanisms to recover from that. And it took me 5 months before I started to really see any significant changes to get better. And that's a long time. That's like, it was like almost half the year to get myself in a place where I felt like a person again. And I was like feeling like I was living in a void space, and I felt like, am I ever going to see the light again? Am I ever going to feel like a person again in my own body, in my own mind, in my own heart? Like when am I going to when am I going to come back? You realize like the things you take for granted when you're going through a really hard time, and you're like, I will never take this for granted again. Like air, so many of us, I feel like, take air for granted. I know I did. And as somebody who's had issues with asthma in my life, I moved to Oregon, and I moved there during the worst smoke season they'd ever had. I think it was 2020. I was there from 2018 to 2021. But everything was on fire, and I was so exhausted and so tired because of all the smoke that was constantly coming into the house. And the only time of year you can go outside, there's just smoke everywhere. It was not great. But anyways, because of that time period, I was like, wow, I value clean air so much. I didn't even know that it was something I was constantly taking for granted. And then I moved back to Florida, and I was like, oh, thank God that I'm able to breathe and with ease and have energy as a result of that. You know, the things we take for granted, the roof over our head, our friends and family, food. I mean, even the smallest of things like air, that's not really a small thing, but we just don't think about it. So it seems like a small thing until you can't breathe. Anyways, I digress. Going back to talking about like what I went through this year myself. And luckily I found a really good naturopath, and she was able to put me on all kinds of, what do you call it? Homeopathics. And these homeopathics was one for nerves, one for like the immune system, I guess, like echinacea and stuff like that. And another one was, then it was one for viruses, and then one just for my heart, because I had some emotion stuff that I needed to work through, where you like smile, and you're actually like going through things, but you smile because people are like, don't want to know that you're sad because they rely on you for their happiness, kind of thing. So I was on some homeopathics for that too. And I'm so grateful that I was able to get in for this naturopath. I had to wait 3 months because she's so booked, because she's so good. And she did the test, this like, what do you call that? It's she tests the meridian points on your hand while you're holding like this copper block in the other hand, and it's running all of these frequency tests on your body to be able to tell what's going on with the frequencies in your system. And mine, she's like, don't tell me anything. I'm going to let the machine do its job, and then we're going to talk after. And I go, okay, all right. And she did the test, and it came off like viruses off the chart, like multiple viruses. It was like, what's the one that everybody like makes you want to sleep all the time? It's the virus that mono is associated with, like that one and COVID and like some other viruses. They were all like flooding my system basically, and then it showed my lymphatic system was like not doing its job, was in overdrive, and some GI tract issues as well. Like there was a bunch of stuff going on, and it even picked up the coolest part. It's not cool, but one of the best parts is that it was able to detect. The machine was able to detect having like inflammation in my brain stem, my brain, and in my inner ear. And I was having pressure in my inner ears. And I was just like, I feel like I have to keep popping my ears like 50 times a day. And she's like, yeah, well, the machine picked up on having inner ear inflammation. So like, that's not just in your head. I mean, it is literally like located in your head, but it's not just in your head. So it was nice to like have these, like this confirmation of what I was going through, even though it was hard. And so she put me on all these homeopathics. I started taking it, and within a month, I did start to feel myself go back into balance. And I think that's so important for people who are struggling with like severe health issues, and there's no answers because our medical system right now, fabulous, as I'm sure you're well aware. I'm thinking about how earlier this year I almost went to the hospital like 7 times because I was in such bad shape. I thought I was really dying. Like I really was like, this is it. I'm going to die. And I was like, I'm not calling the wee woo mobile. I'm not going in an ambulance and paying whatever $5,000 to go on a joyride on a loud car. I'd rather die. And when I realized that I didn't want to pay for an ambulance, but I was in such bad shape that I could potentially be dying, and that I would rather just die than have to put myself in further debt if it's not actually a real deal. When I had that realization, I was like, this is like our system is in some serious need of help and revamping in a big way. Like I was like, I'd rather die than like have to have a house payment to survive. No thanks. I don't wish to play with this game. I don't want to play it. I don't want to be a part of this and, have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt just because I go to the hospital one time and maybe there is something kind of wrong, but maybe they just call it anxiety and they send you on your way. So, so I became really aware of that issue this year, and a nice little reframe I'd like to do around that heavy topic is that while it's really bad right now, at least in America, I think that a lot of the systems and things that are currently going on in the world are going to get shaken up here real soon. And I think the medical industry is on the verge of having a massive revamp. And we're just in the not so pretty part of it right now, where all of us, well, most of us, are feeling not too good about our medical system. So I think that will be changing. And so I'm having a positive perspective that maybe in the next few years, I'm hoping, it will get itself together because it needs to get itself together. So there's that. So because of my own medical journey and then being able to luckily find a naturopath, somebody who can really treat the cause and not just the symptoms, so grateful. I did go to a regular doctor, so for all of you who are like, okay, this holistic lady's not actually doing modern medicine, I did go to a regular doctor while and before I saw the naturopath, and they checked my ears and they're like, you're fine, Here, take a nasal spray. Here, take these really intense form of like ibuprofen pain pills. That's gonna solve it. I'm like, there's gotta be better solutions to this, guys. Like, just give me pain pills and like steroids and send me on my way and be like, yeah, you're cured. No. So, yeah, when I kept getting like those kinds of results and answers from my regular doctor, and I like her, she's nice and she's sincere, at least there's that, because I know a lot of doctors are not sincere. She meant well. But it's just our medical system currently feels like it's really limited. But I'm sure people have a lot of stories about that. I'm not the only one, that's for sure. What I love about TikTok, and to people give TikTok such a bad rap like all the time, but through TikTok, I have been able to find out about so many weird, rare, or not so rare ailments or diseases or just body composition things that people had no idea about. And everybody's putting the pieces together in a really beautiful way as like a community on TikTok, I've noticed. An example of this would be, I'm going to butcher this, Eleanor's Dalnos. With that one in particular, I've like learned so much about it. I'm like, I might have a connective tissue disorder because of a lot of the things they go through. And I'm like, I have like 5 of 10 of those things. Interesting. And I wouldn't have known about that otherwise, and I learned a lot about like POTS and people with lupus, and thank God I don't think I have those things, but like it was just really cool to be able to learn in a community environment through people sharing their stories and being able to connect your own dots through other people's experiences. Again, why I am starting this podcast. And it's not going to be just about medical things, even though that's often a large part of people's transformation stories, as we all know. I find that a lot of major transformation in life comes through either like addiction, health issues, death, or other really intense forced transformation situations in your life where you're like, okay, time to sink or swim. And sometimes you're like, I'm just too tired. I guess I'm going to sink. But then life is like, no, you're going to swim. Here's a life raft. Kick. And that life raft, when you feel like you're just like, I can't swim anymore, can come in when you least expect it. And sometimes life has this funny thing where you have to sometimes, I'm going to say give up, but you have to release control over things that you think you have control over, and you have to let them go in order for it to actually come through. And I've had quite a few instances in my life where I was mad at the universe and I was like, you know what? Fine. I'm going to give it up. I'm going to give it up. All this stuff that I've been working on forever, I will drop it like it's hot and I will let it go. And then I'll step away from it. And that's what I do. And oftentimes I do it with the intention of like, I never need to do this ever again. And then it's only then is when it comes through. When I finally step away 100% and just, what's the word? Let go and let God, I think is like the phrase that people use for that. Except it's a little darker when I'm doing it. I'm not like, let go and let God. I have faith. It's more like, I'm done, and whatever it's going to be is what it's going to be. So it's a little salty while I do it, but I do it with a full heart. It's kind of a contradictory statement, but you know what I'm saying. So I've had instances where I've had to completely let go, and that is when the thing that I want comes through, and I'm like, and I see this time and time again in my life. I'm like, why do I even question it at this point? Like, this is how it goes. This is what life does. It wants to see how much we want it, and then it wants to see if we can let it go. And if it will, if we can have faith that it's going to come back, is this or something better? I know I sound like I'm almost saying it sarcastically, but I do mean it sincerely. I did videos like this when I was what was I? I was like probably like 20. I was 24. I was 24 when I started my YouTube channel. No, I was younger than that. But I started posting videos when I think I was 23 or 24. And I had such a sunshiny, disposition where everything was just like, yeah, we're going to make it through and it's going to be great, you know? And then, of course, your 30s come along and you go through this magical thing called your Saturn return. And you have your whole home knocked down. And you're like, time to rebuild. The whole universe is like, time to rebuild. It's time. Whatever you thought you were building for the last 30 years, wrong. It's time to rebuild your new structures. And I think when that happens, if you have a particularly hard Saturn return, yeah, you come out the other end a little salty. I mean, that's been my experience. I was like, wow, so many bad things happened in such a short period of time that I had literally no control over. Makes my little sunny disposition I had towards life just a little less sunny, you know? But I've worked through a lot of that too. And that's another reason for this podcast is because I went through some deep apathy for like a year and a half. And one of the most powerful things somebody called me out on, a healer called me out on, when I was talking to her about, like, I surrendered. I fully surrendered. I've let it all go, okay? I let it all go. Everything's fine. I'm in surrender. She's like, are you though? Are you really in surrender? I go, what do you mean? Like, I've let it all go. Like, I'm surrendered. She was like, she's like, have you surrendered or have you just given up? It's like mic drop. Okay, it was like I had never thought of it that way before, and I had confused apathy for surrender, and you know, giving up isn't surrender. And I was like, what a massive lesson I needed to learn. And I think a lot of people need to hear that. So that's also why I'm sharing that on this first episode where it's just kind of us hanging out. Because for people who are really going through it, apathy is not surrender. Apathy is giving up. And I think it is the most insidious of the emotions we can experience because it makes you feel like safe in it. You're like, yeah, I'm doing the work. I surrendered, whatever. And really, you're just floating around in the abyss, letting yourself drown in negativity. And that is not the answer. So I had to learn that the hard way this year. And it was really a powerful lesson. And that I still catch myself in times where I'm rewiring my neural patterns with it. And I'm like, no, I trust that what is for me will be for me and will happen with ease and grace, and that I don't need to force or push anything, and that I also don't need to have hate in my heart while I let go and be bitter about the things that I've lost. There's a lot of lessons I've also had to learn in regards to not holding on too tightly and the law of non-attachment, let's say. Like, I'm really good now at being like, c'est la vie. If it's in my life, it's in my life. If it leaves, then it leaves. Like, that is where it's at this point. And I used to be somebody who really loved like my things and my people and my family and my pets. I'm gonna call them my pets, my little fur babies, my little furry guardians. I was holding on to those things so much because I love them so much, right? And I associated like love with this clinging. And the reality is that that's not what love is. Love is this endless, encompassing thing that surrounds us all the time, period, end of sentence. And that everything we lose, we never really lose. And you know what's really funny is that as I said that, as I said, oh, everything you lose, you never really lose. And then my camera was like, my camera was like, "Oh, by the way, you don't have enough phone memory for anything else." And I was like, "Okay, heard. Good reminder." And it was just kind of driving that point home. So that's why there's a shift if you're watching the video of this. With the video, that's what happened. So fun. Gotta bring some fresh energy in, I guess. As I was saying, so nothing is ever lost, even if we lose physical items. And uh, there's always, it's creating space for something else. Like something that really upset me that I had broken, somebody else broke it. When I was living in Oregon, I had this little dollar store coffee mug, and I loved that mug so much. It's only $1, it's nothing fancy. But when I did my first cross country road trip, like, oh God, what was that? It was 2016, I think. It was 2016. Anyways, that was the coffee cup I drank out of the entire road trip. It was like 60 days of us traveling and everything. And it just had a lot of happy memories associated with that coffee mug. And so it was sentimental to me, and when I moved to Oregon like years later, I had that coffee mug and I was living in a shared space with someone, and one of their sons broke the coffee mug. And she didn't think anything of that coffee mug. She threw it in the trash. And I was in there making breakfast one morning and I was throwing something out, and then I looked down in the trash can and I was like, that's my coffee mug broken in the trash. What? And no one thought to tell me because to them it was like just a regular old dollar store coffee mug. Like, who cares? But the fact was that it mattered to me, and I had associated, right, all of these memories into this mug. As if this mug was like that trip I went on in itself. And now that it was broken, all of the memories are gone. And obviously, that's not the reality of the situation, but like that's what the mind had connected it to. And that was another good lesson in non attachment. And so I wrote a poem, I think it was this year, about, it was titled The Souvenir Shop is a Lie. And that's because, we go through life collecting these things that hold sentimental value to us, right? We think it's really pretty, or it's rare, one of a kind, whatever the reason is that we, pick up certain things in our life and keep it around. And the truth is, when you die, you can't take any of that with you, right? Like, think of the Egyptians. They're just buried in all of their things, and but the soul at the end of the day leaves the body, so you can't take it all with you. And I was just thinking about the gift shop's a lie. You think on your way out you can take it with you, but when you're on your way out of this life, you can't take any of that with you. So the things that you have that bring you joy every day, enjoy them, but also know that the only value that's there is value you've placed on it yourself, or somebody else has assigned to it and you believe in their version of that value. But it's ultimately what you assign to it. And in my perspective, real value is in the connections we make with each other and with nature and animals around us. And that's really what is sacred, not so much the things. Anybody with Taurus placements tends to love their things, and that's okay. I'm a Taurus rising. I love nice things of value that make my life easier. I enjoy them thoroughly. As I'm speaking to my nice microphone, I appreciate this microphone. If I didn't have this microphone, the audio would not be as good. It's just making things nice makes me happy and makes other Taurus people happy. I digress. So the point being, I had to learn the lesson of non-attachment and letting things go and being like, that's okay. Like, that's okay. Let it go. You don't need it in your life anymore. And that was something I really needed to learn. I have family members that like held on to a lot of things and put a lot of value into those things, and that when they died, you know, he was still like from the afterlife coming through and being like, "Where's my hat? Where's my things?" So even in the afterlife, they were still caring about their things, but then they can't touch them anymore. So it's like the sooner I feel like, accept that things don't matter, the easier life is. And I know for most people that's not a huge deal, but for some of you, you needed to hear that too. Um, yeah, so when it comes to losing things, I've accepted that, moved on. But when it comes to losing people, um, little fairy angels and others in your life that are really important, there's a grieving that takes place. And a lot of times it's not replaceable. When you lose something that's of value to you, that's a relationship, with friends, family, partners, whatever, furry angels, it's hard because you can't replace that. You can't do anything with that. You can't replace your mother, or your father, or your grandparents. Special relationships, friendships. Like, you have to treasure them while you have them, because you won't have them forever. Everybody's living on borrowed time. And that sounds really dark if you look at it in a certain perspective, but it's actually like a really beautiful gift, because it makes you appreciate things more. Like, if you had unlimited time, you just be like, I'm bored and I don't care. If you had eternity, you'd be like, well, why does it matter? So, right. So the time limit makes us appreciate and have like more value and depth to the experience. So when you look at it that way, it's just part of this reality we're living in, where things are limited, not because they want to torture us with it, but life wants us to appreciate it and to value it at every stage in which we get to experience it, right? And so that's a lot of the lessons that I've been going through over 2024. Some pretty big, heavy stuff, but I am so grateful for it now, which has taken me years to say that, because I have to say the last 4 years of my life, real dark, which is why I started writing a poetry book, about being in the void space, and I'm excited for that one to come out. So for people who are living in the void, there'll be some poetry you can tap into and have that experience of feeling like your experience is being recognized and shared. It's not just you going through it alone, because we're not going through it alone. Anyways, so the last 4 years been really bad for me personally. Like, I went through my Saturn return, like I already talked about, and I lost so much in regards to where I was living, personal items, friendships, relationships, family. I mean, it just all burned down, quite literally. There was a fire that burned my town down when I was in Oregon that made me move away from Oregon. Um, so life just had to burn completely down and like a phoenix rise from the ashes like 10 times. And I was bitter because of it, because there was so much of it that happened in such a short period of time, because that's what life does, right? It's like everything at once. It's like, let's just take 3 to 10 things and we're just going to shove it all into one time period and see how you do with it. It's like life extra hard. I don't know why that happens to so many of us, but it seems to be a pattern, so I'm going to speak to it. So we go through all these things, right? And we learn and we grow. And when we go through all of these things under pressure at once, I think it really challenges our spirit and our character to let us know where on the meter, like where are we at in our personal development. And for myself, I feel like because of what I went through and finally coming out the other side of it, I feel so much more calm and grounded in my being coming back from that space. I feel like I'm like must be like what like Navy SEALs go through when they go through like trauma training, torture training, and they're like, yeah, now I'm strong, I'm ready for anything. I feel kind of like we go through phases of that in life in different ways, emotionally and sometimes physically as well. And I kind of had that phase happen to me this year and the last 4 years combined, but specifically this year was like the final burning of all of this pain from my past. The video, again, Mercury retrograde's doing its job for me today. So letting these things go and welcoming in the next chapter of your life is, I feel like, really the name of the game if you're going through a really hard time right now. Like, if things are clearing away from you, is a nice way to put it. If things are kind of falling down around you and your foundation that maybe you've built most of your life on is collapsing at this time, let it be known that it's not because like life hates you. It's creating space for something better for you to come in, for something new to come in. And it's kind of the law of non-attachment happening for you as well. That what we think we want and sometimes what we really want and what we really deserve can be two different things. Sometimes our beliefs are really limiting about what we want. And the universe is like, actually, I have something better planned for you that you don't even know that you want it or that you could want it or that it would feel so good inside your body when you receive it. And you have to just be open to these things coming through. And then you also have to be open to letting things go to create space for those things to come through. And I think that's the message I'm gonna end on for today, for this little solo chat that we've gotten into. And I am so excited for what the future holds and what is going to be shared. I feel really good about it, and I can't wait to share these stories with you from others who have been through all kinds of interesting things, and how they transformed it and how it transformed their life and like changed everything, perhaps for the better. And sometimes it looks like it's for worse, and then you give it some time and it morphs. So on that note, thank you so much for tuning in, for being a part of this podcast and video. It's been a pleasure to sit here and share some time with you, and I'm really grateful that we've had this space together. And I hope that you join me for this ride. Please, like or subscribe wherever you're listening or watching this. It really helps to continue this podcast, as well as if you're actually interested and you want to watch more of this and enjoy this in your life. I'm really grateful and happy to share it with you. And I hope that wherever you're watching this, you have a great rest of your day or night. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.